Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Are drones the future of warfare or a dangerous distraction? Professor Justin Bronk warns NATO, don't ditch traditional firepower just yet. Could relying too much on drones cost lives in the next big conflict? Let's break it down. Today, we're embarking on a crucial exploration into the evolving role of uncrewed aerial systems, or UAS, in modern warfare. We're dissecting the strategic debate around these technologies, particularly focusing on the insightful analysis of Professor Justin Bronk from the Royal United Services Institute. Professor Bronk argues passionately against NATO's potential over-reliance on drones as a direct replacement for traditional military capabilities. Our mission today is to understand the profound nuances of this argument, to separate the pervasive hype surrounding these systems from the strategic reality on the ground, and ultimately to offer you a clearer, more informed picture of what truly strengthens, or conversely, what could significantly weaken, a modern military force facing near-peer adversaries. Let's unpack this by first setting the scene in Ukraine, a conflict that has truly become a crucible for modern military innovation. Since 2023, first-person view, or FPV, uncrewed aerial systems, and one-way attack, or OWA, drones have evolved from niche tools to, well, increasingly critical components in Ukraine's defensive efforts. We're talking about a fundamental shift here, one that has profoundly changed the daily dynamics of the battlefield, from how infantry operate to how supply lines are defended. It's no longer a marginal addition. These systems are deeply embedded.
Absolutely. What's truly fascinating here is the sheer scale of this evolution, something almost unprecedented in modern warfare. If we look at projections for 2025, the Ukrainian battlefield is characterized by literally millions of FPV UAS and thousands of OWA drones. This isn't about a few specialized units employing them. It's about a pervasive, almost ubiquitous presence of these systems, shaping nearly every engagement.
Millions. That's hard to even visualize on a battlefield.
It is, and it's not just Ukraine. Russia, for its part, has been equally dynamic. They've significantly scaled up their own drone manufacturing and development capabilities, not just for tactical use, but also employing them to supplement their conventional cruise and ballistic missiles for long-range strike campaigns, often targeting Ukrainian infrastructure deep behind the front lines. This mutual, intense investment by both sides is pushing innovation at an incredible, almost real-time pace.
To give you a concrete sense of the numbers we're talking about, President Zelensky recently stated that Ukrainian industry alone produced over 2 million FPVs and 100,000 long-range OWA drones in 2024. And their ambition isn't slowing. The target for 2025 is an astonishing 4.5 million FPV drones.
4.5 million. Just wow.
Right. And on top of this, partner nations have contributed tens of thousands more, so the total volume of these systems in play is truly unprecedented. It underscores a fundamental, rapid shift in how warfare is conducted at both the tactical and even operational levels, raising critical questions about cost, effectiveness, and future military doctrine. This extensive and frankly overwhelming use of drones in Ukraine has led many prominent voices in Western military, political, and journalistic circles to proclaim what they see as a definitive revolution in military affairs.
The RMA narrative, it's very strong.
Exactly. There's a very strong narrative taking hold that the very nature of conflict is fundamentally changing before our eyes, primarily driven by these agile, often inexpensive, uncrewed systems. The thinking is that the future belongs to swarms of drones, not traditional platforms.
This widespread perception, while understandable given the visual evidence from Ukraine, raises an important question. What's truly driving this revolution idea, and is it entirely accurate? It's often assumed, almost as a given, that core Western equipment and doctrines, our traditional strengths like achieving air superiority through advanced fighter jets or conducting armored maneuver warfare with heavy tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, are becoming irrelevant or even obsolete.
Sort of like battleships versus aircraft carriers back in the day.
Kind of. That's the analogy some people draw. The prevailing belief is that simply having large numbers of cheap drones inherently offers greater combat mass, superior lethality, and significantly more efficiency compared to what are now commonly being called legacy platforms. This narrative suggests a profound paradigm shift has occurred, rendering traditional military power less effective or simply too expensive for future conflicts. It's a compelling story, but perhaps an incomplete one.
But what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you grapple with understanding the future of global security and defense? Is this widespread perception of a drone revolution fully aligned with the complex reality on the ground in Ukraine? Or are there critical nuances and strategic implications we might be missing? For instance, how might this emphasis on drones impact a nation's defense budget? And could it inadvertently lead to new vulnerabilities? That's precisely what Professor Bronk challenges, and we're now going to get into his powerful counterarguments. Here's where Professor Bronk's analysis becomes critically important. He argues that relying too heavily on massed small UAS and long-range OWA drones to outright replace traditional weapons systems would be a profound and potentially dangerous mistake for NATO.
A mistake, yeah. A big one, potentially.
He lays out several compelling reasons for this, and the first, arguably the most critical, is that Russia possesses the most formidable counter-UAS, CUAS capabilities on Earth.
This isn't just a bold claim. It's a conclusion drawn from years of intense, real-world combat experience and continuous adaptation. What's fascinating here is the sheer sophistication and layered approach of Russia's CUAS capabilities. They haven't just bought a few off-the-shelf systems. Instead, they've developed and integrated a wide array of dedicated CUAS electronic warfare systems, meaning they can jam or disrupt drone control signals and navigation.
So basically stopping the drone from being controlled or knowing where it is.
Exactly. And alongside that, modified infantry weapons specifically designed to engage small drones kinetically, shooting them down. Crucially, they've also integrated sophisticated short-range air defense, SA-SHA systems, into their CUAS network.
Okay.
The key is that these capabilities are deployed and integrated at all levels of their ground forces, from individual infantry squads to larger formations. This isn't an afterthought. It's a central, continuously evolving part of their defense doctrine, refined over 3 years of high-intensity combat experience against a steadily increasing and incredibly innovative Ukrainian drone threat.
So they've been learning in real time, essentially.
Constantly learning, adapting, and building significant resilience against drone attacks. They've created a truly formidable defensive shield. To give you an even clearer picture of this adaptation, consider the physical defenses. Russian vehicles and fighting positions are now routinely equipped with ubiquitous physical protections like netting, space bar armor, often called cope cages, and additional padding.
Right. We have all seen pictures of those cages on tanks.
Specifically designed to mitigate the impact of FPV drone strikes. Beyond physical defenses, they've integrated short-range jammers directly onto vehicles and strongpoints, creating localized electronic bubbles that disrupt incoming drones. Even Russian infantry, as a standard part of their basic training before deployment, receive specific detailed instruction on how to identify, track, and engage drones.
Wow, so it's part of basic training now.
It is. Furthermore, Russian air bases and other critical military infrastructure, which were initially vulnerable, are being rapidly hardened and equipped with additional point defenses to reduce damage from the frequent and numerous Ukrainian OWA drone strikes. This comprehensive, multi-layered approach demonstrates a deep commitment to countering the drone threat at every level of operations.
So, despite the huge volumes, millions, as we discussed, of drones Ukraine launches, Professor Bronk highlights that their effectiveness is severely diminished. Only a small fraction actually reach their intended targets, and even fewer achieve decisive damage. What stands out to you about this, and what profound implications does it have for Western military thinking, especially for those who advocate for a drone-first strategy? It sounds like the sheer quantity isn't translating directly into decisive impact due to these sophisticated countermeasures.
It's crucial to understand that while UAS do inflict steady, persistent attrition against Russian personnel and vehicles indeed, they are often the primary source of daily losses in certain trench warfare contexts.
So they're having an effect.
Oh, definitely. But this is occurring within a very specific and constraining environment. This attrition is only effective because Russian forces are still significantly constrained by extensive minefields, which channel their movements into predictable corridors. Furthermore, they are forced to disperse their forces widely by the constant and devastating threat of Ukrainian traditional long-range fires, artillery, GMLRS.
Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System.
Right, ATACMS.
Army Tactical Missile System.
Yep, Storm Shadow Scale P cruise missiles and glide bombs. These traditional fires compel Russian units to spread out, making them more vulnerable to the persistent, though individually less decisive, drone attacks.
Okay, so the traditional weapons create the conditions for the drones to work better.
Precisely. If NATO were to make the profound mistake of pursuing massed UAS at the expense of rebuilding stocks of these traditional fires, if we were to say drones will simply replace artillery and air power, Russian forces would find it significantly easier to mitigate UAS lethality. They would face a less dispersed, less constrained opponent, making their CUAS capabilities already formidable even more effective.
That makes sense.
Essentially, the traditional fires are creating the conditions where drones can be effective. rather than drones being effective in isolation against a concentrated, well-defended adversary.
This leads us to Professor Bronk's second critical observation. A strategic feedback loop is at play here. Ukraine's increasing reliance on UAS, often born out of necessity due to persistent personnel shortages, ammunition shortfalls, and a lack of traditional heavy equipment.
They're using what they have, basically.
Right. This has inadvertently allowed Russia to focus and significantly refine its CUAS development. It's a strategic dynamic born more out of Ukraine's dire situation than a deliberate strategic choice to prioritize drones.
This indeed raises an important question about the long-term consequences of such forced dependence. If Ukrainian forces are compelled to depend ever more heavily on UAS for combat effectiveness, Russia is able to focus steadily greater attention, resources, and R&D efforts on refining their CUAS capabilities.
And they're setting up dedicated centers for this.
Exactly. This isn't just a theoretical concern. This trend has been particularly obvious since the establishment of the Rubicon Center of Advanced Unmanned Technologies in summer 2024. This dedicated center signifies Russia's institutional strategic commitment to dominating the counter-drone space, centralizing their development and deployment efforts.
Okay, that's a significant development.
And there's a worrying trend, too. A particularly concerning trend observed has been the rapid rate at which Ukrainian drone operator casualties have been increasing throughout the spring and summer of 2025.
Why is that happening?
It's because Russian forces, having specialized their CUAS intelligence and targeting, have focused their efforts on precisely triangulating the locations of these operators' hidden positions, their hides, and then rapidly bringing devastating traditional artillery fire, precision glide bombs, and even their own specialized UAS to bear on them.
So Russia is actively hunting the drone operators themselves.
Yes. It's a direct and tragic consequence of Russia being able to specialize its counter-tactics against what has become Ukraine's predominant offensive tool.
So if NATO nations were to find themselves in a direct conflict with Russian forces in the coming years, they would be facing an adversary that has had even more time and, critically, more real-world combat experience to further improve its already formidable CUAS capabilities. Lessons learned tragically at Ukraine's expense. What's the bigger picture here regarding military preparedness and strategic choices for NATO? It seems like this specialization on Russia's part could have profound and negative implications for any NATO drone-centric strategy.
Conversely, though, this greater Russian tactical, operational, and technical focus on countering Ukrainian UAS means, by definition, the less they're able to focus on training, equipping, and innovating their forces to counter NATO's traditional areas of military strength.
The trade-off.
Exactly. This highlights a crucial strategic trade-off for Moscow. If Russia is pouring immense resources and intellectual capital into CUAS because that's the primary threat they face from Ukraine, they are, by definition, allocating fewer resources to developing countermeasures against our advanced air power, our long-range precision fires, or our highly trained professional maneuver forces.
So by leaning too heavily into drones ourselves,
we risk inadvertently allowing Russia to optimize its defenses against that very approach, while potentially neglecting the very capabilities where NATO historically holds a decisive advantage. It's about strategically influencing where you want your adversary to focus their defensive efforts. Do you want them to become experts at countering your drones, or still be struggling against your high-end air power and combined arms?
that's a really critical strategic point. Okay, argument number 3 from Professor Bronk. This one is quite stark. It's a sobering reality check for any unbridled optimism about drones. Ukraine, despite being widely recognized as a world leader in developing, aggressively using, and innovating with military UAS, producing millions of them, is still taking heavy casualties and slowly losing ground to Russian assaults.
Yeah, that's the hard truth on the ground.
This stark reality directly contradicts the narrative that drones alone are a game changer capable of securing decisive victory or rapid territorial gains.
This undeniable fact suggests that even with millions of drones deployed across the battlefield, UAS alone do not guarantee strategic initiative or operational momentum against a well-adapted adversary. While Ukraine has used drones with incredible ingenuity and courage to prevent large-scale Russian breakthroughs, to inflict huge casualties on attacking forces throughout 2024 and the first half of 2025, and to provide invaluable reconnaissance.
They've definitely slowed Russia down, haven't they?
Immensely. But the undeniable fact remains that Russian forces committed against Ukraine are significantly larger today than at any point since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022, and they continue, albeit slowly, to grind forward. This demonstrates a critical limitation. Drones are powerful tools for attrition and localized effects, and for providing critical intelligence. But they don't necessarily enable large-scale offensive operations, deep territorial gains, or the decisive recapture of territory against a determined, adapting, and numerically superior foe.
So they can hold the line, inflict pain, but maybe not push forward decisively on their own.
That seems to be the lesson, yes. They can deny the enemy easy advances, but they don't always provide the punch needed to push the front line forward significantly.
Given this reality, what does this all mean for how Ukrainian commanders themselves view the balance between drones versus traditional weaponry? If they're at the absolute forefront of drone innovation and usage, do they see them as a complete replacement for, say, artillery or anti-tank missiles or something else entirely? Their perspective, as those actually fighting the war day in and day out, is absolutely vital here.
It is, and according to Bronk, when available, high-end ATGMs or anti-tank guided missiles.
Like javelins or NLRWs?
Yes, those types. And anti-tank bonus artillery rounds, which are smart munitions designed to target the top of armored vehicles, and regular artillery are still prized by many Ukrainian commanders. They value these traditional systems precisely because they are far more responsive and more reliably able to knock out vehicles and suppress massing infantry than FPV drones, especially when it comes to countering desperate Russian attempts to break through the front lines or dislodge Ukrainian defenders.
So for those critical moments, they want the reliable punch of conventional weapons.
Right. While FPVs are indeed far more widely available for inflicting steady, continuous attrition against personnel and vehicles over time, which is absolutely essential in a static, attritional trench warfare environment, their slower response time and lower reliability against hardened targets makes them demonstrably less effective for decisive, time-sensitive operations compared to conventional arms.
That nuance is crucial.
It is. This nuance is critical. The shift to greater reliance on UAS in Ukraine has often been driven as much by sheer necessity due to shortages of traditional equipment and ammunition from international partners, as it has been by a direct, unalloyed desire to replace those conventional capabilities entirely. They're making do with what they have and doing so brilliantly, but they still prefer the decisive punch of conventional systems when available.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Finally, Professor Bronk points out a significant structural and experiential disadvantage for NATO. Western forces aiming to transform their lethality using similar UAS-dependent tactics are starting from a far lower base than Ukrainian forces today. This isn't just about a technology gap, but about the entire ecosystem of military development, production, and operational experience.
Exactly. This encompasses a wide and complex range of interconnected tactical, industrial, and even regulatory perspectives that fundamentally limit Western militaries compared to wartime Ukraine. First, Western procurement processes designed for peacetime and typically focus on large-scale, high-cost, exquisitely engineered systems are inherently slower and far less agile.
Bureaucracy, basically.
Well, yes, and also just the nature of developing very complex, high-reliability systems. Our ability to rapidly scale up UAS production to the millions of units seen in Ukraine will undoubtedly be significantly slower and more cumbersome than what Ukrainian industry has achieved under the immense existential pressures of total war. Ukraine has demonstrated an incredible, almost wartime miracle capacity to innovate and produce at scale under duress, driven by survival.
We likely couldn't replicate that speed in peacetime.
Highly unlikely. Furthermore, the typical approach to regulation and certification of UAS in most Western militaries in peacetime is incredibly rigorous. While crucial for safety and reliability in normal operations, these extensive protocols are likely to hinder the rapid innovation and adaptation cycles that are the hallmark of drone development in wartime Ukraine.
So our own safety standards could slow us down compared to Ukraine's more adaptive approach.
Potentially, yes. This means that if NATO were to try and replicate Ukraine's experience, we would likely lag well behind the Ukrainian armed forces' hard-won capacity for rapid, iterative evolution. Consider the contrast between a garage workshop innovating daily in Ukraine versus the multi-year, multi-billion-dollar procurement cycles common in Western defense ministries.
So what does this all mean for Western capabilities and, crucially, for our deterrent credibility against a potential adversary like Russia? If we're slower to adapt, less agile in procurement, and less experienced in large-scale, low-cost drone operations, what's the realistic outcome of a heavily drone-centric strategy for NATO? Does it truly provide a credible deterrent?
Well, Professor Bronk argues Western forces are highly unlikely to achieve transformative lethality and thus truly credible deterrence against Russian forces by simply procuring several tens or even hundreds of thousands of similar drones more slowly. with significantly less practical, real-world combat experience, and with a far less adaptive industrial base.
So just buying lots of drones isn't the answer.
Not on its own, no. The implication is crystal clear. Blindly trying to replicate Ukraine's drone reliance without their unique wartime innovation environment and industrial capacity would not yield the same, let alone superior, results. It calls into serious question the feasibility of a drone-centric Western military strategy as a primary means of achieving deterrence or victory against a near-peer adversary like Russia, especially when Russia is already so adept at countering such systems. It's not about if drones are useful, but if they can be the primary source of combat power for high-end force.
Okay, so if replacing traditional firepower with drones is, as Professor Bronk argues, a strategic mistake, what then is the viable, most effective path forward for NATO? Professor Bronk argues there is far greater potential to deter Russia by investing to fill in the gaps and enable NATO's areas of existing military strength.
Right, enhancement, not replacement.
This shifts the entire paradigm from a false choice of replacement to a sophisticated strategy of enhancement and force multiplication.
Specifically, this means leveraging NATO's undeniable existing capability to gain and exploit air superiority through our high-end air power. This is where NATO has a distinct qualitative advantage. Advanced fighter jets, stealth technology, sophisticated air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions, and highly trained pilots.
Our traditional strengths.
Exactly. By effectively establishing control of the skies, or at least denying the enemy air superiority, we can then greatly multiply the power of our professional armies, which are optimized for maneuver warfare, rapid, agile movements designed to bypass enemy strengths and strike at weaknesses. UAS, in this context, become incredibly potent tools to open doors, extend reach, and enhance situational awareness for these traditional strengths, rather than trying to do everything themselves.
They become enablers.
Enablers, precisely. They become the eyes, the jammers, the decoys, the spotters, enablers, not replacements.
Can you give us a powerful, real-world example of this concept in action? How has conventional air power recently demonstrated its decisive potency, even in an environment saturated with a multitude of drones and missiles? This would help clarify the concept of drones as enablers.
What's truly fascinating here, and quite relevant, is the recent demonstration of how potent conventional air power is when applied well, as seen in what the Israeli Air Force was able to achieve against Iran. Iran, we must remember, is a nation with a vast arsenal, boasting thousands of advanced long-range ballistic and cruise missiles and hundreds of thousands of drones of all kinds, from reconnaissance to attack variants.
A huge drone and missile threat.
Absolutely. Yet, despite this extensive drone and missile threat, the Israeli Air Force proved its decisive advantage and capability to operate effectively. While small UAS deployed by Special Operations Forces and loitering munitions did play an important role in their operations, fundamentally they served to enable access for far more potent traditional assets: fast jets and armed medium-altitude, long-endurance UAVs.
So the drones paved the way for the jets.
In essence, yes. These drones were not the primary strike force delivering the decisive blows, but rather acted as the advanced scouts, the jammer carriers, the decoy launchers, the critical tools that created openings, suppressed enemy defenses, and provided real-time targeting for the high-value, high-impact conventional aircraft to deliver their payloads effectively and safely. It's a perfect illustration of drones as force multipliers, not standalone solutions.
So if drones aren't designed to be the main punch, how exactly do they act as that crucial enabler? What are the specific tactical applications where they provide the most value without attempting to take over the core mission from traditional platforms? Give us a clearer picture of their precision role in this enabling function.
Okay, so UAS are most potent as a means to enable artillery and aircraft to strike targets responsively and/or through active defenses. Think of them as the sophisticated support acts that clear the stage for the main performance. A clear and compelling example of this is the use of relatively affordable stand-in jammers and cheap kinetic and decoy OWA drones to support CDED operations.
Suppression destruction of enemy air defenses, taking out the anti-aircraft systems.
Exactly. These are missions absolutely critical for creating safe corridors in enemy airspace for our more expensive manned aircraft or precision munitions. These drones can be launched by ground forces or from aircraft to saturate Russian air defense radars with electronic noise or to exhaust their interceptor ammunition by acting as decoys.
Overwhelm their sensors and defenses.
Precisely. This overwhelming electronic and physical presence then enables our more advanced air forces or long-range artillery to successfully get their high-end munitions, such as the AGM-88G ARGM-GMER, which is an advanced anti-radiation guided missile designed to home in precisely on enemy radar emissions.
A radar killer missile.
Right. And GMLRS through key targets without interception. Ukrainian forces, notably, have had significant success using very similar tactics, employing their own drones and limited precision fires to enable their ATAS CMS to strike and degrade Russian S-400 systems, some of Russia's most advanced air defense units, since 2023.
So Ukraine is already doing this enabling tactic effectively.
Yes, demonstrating its viability. This is a powerful testament to the enabling power of drones in a complex, denied environment. And importantly, this isn't just a theoretical concept for NATO. The Royal Air Force is already actively procuring UAS for precisely such roles through its Autonomous Collaborative Platform ACP program.
Okay, so procurement is happening for these specific enabling roles.
It is. This is smart integration, leveraging drones exactly where they add distinct high-leverage value without trying to force them into roles for which traditional systems are far better suited.
When we talk about efficiency and scalability in modern conflict, how do traditional precision-guided munitions, especially those delivered by air, compare to massed drones? Is there a hidden advantage in conventional air power that is perhaps being overlooked in the current drone hype and focus on sheer numbers?
Absolutely. This is a crucial point often missed. Nothing in either the current NATO or Ukrainian inventory can genuinely compete with the sheer efficiency and scalability of direct attack munitions, such as the GBU-38 JDAM.
Joint direct attack munition, basically a GPS-guided bomb kit.
That's right. Or the pave way for bombs in a scenario where air superiority, or at least sufficient access to the airspace, has been achieved. These aren't just powerful. They're incredibly cost-effective given their precision and destructive capability. For unit costs in the region of just $20,000 to $30,000, which is remarkably cheap for precision weapons capable of devastating effects.
That is cheap compared to missiles.
Very cheap. These bombs can destroy an incredibly wide range of critical targets, including hardened ones. We're talking about armored vehicles, robust fighting positions, vast supply dumps, critical warehouses, key factories, and vital command posts. What's more, they are relatively easy to manufacture at scale using existing industrial facilities, and a single advanced fighter jet with a targeting pod can deliver multiple bombs on each sortie, covering a vast area or striking multiple distinct targets with pinpoint precision.
So one jet sortie can deliver a lot of precise destruction very efficiently.
Exactly. This offers massed lethality with precision, delivered with incredible efficiency, and at a scale that simple FPV drones cannot match for overall strategic impact.
So when we synthesize all these points, what does this comprehensive understanding mean for credible deterrence against a potential adversary like Russia? How do these traditional capabilities, intelligently enabled and amplified by drones, paint a more convincing and formidable picture for our adversaries than a strategy that might simply bet heavily on a drone-first force?
For a credible deterrence by denial posture, which fundamentally means convincing a potential adversary that their aggression will be unsuccessful or simply too costly, rather than just threatening future punishment, NATO forces in Europe fundamentally need to convince Russian leaders that they can rapidly degrade and start to roll back Russian ground-based air defenses in the event of a direct clash.
Taking out their air defenses is key.
Paramount. This ability to neutralize those complex layered air defenses quickly and decisively is paramount. There is a viable and indeed strategically sound road to achieving such a deterrent capability for European air forces, especially with crucial support from the land component in the shape of long-range artillery and OWA drones, specifically for suppression purposes.
So it's a combined arms approach, air and land working together.
Absolutely. While it will still require urgent and significant investment in these traditional and enabling capabilities, this approach poses far lower risks than betting heavily on FPV and loitering munition development as the primary means of lethality for NATO's high-end forces.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it is far technically and tactically easier to counter a force that primarily relies on massed, cheap FPV and OWA drones for its primary lethality than it is to counter well-employed air power, long-range fires, armor, artillery, and mortars within a professional joint force.
A multi-layered threat is harder to counter than a single-layer one, essentially.
Precisely. The latter represents a multifaceted, sophisticated, and deeply integrated threat that demands a far more complex, resource-intensive, and strategically challenging counter-response from an adversary like Russia. By focusing on enabling our core strengths, the very areas where NATO has invested for decades and retains a qualitative edge, we make ourselves a much tougher, more unpredictable, and ultimately more credible target for deterrence.
Okay, that makes a compelling case for the enhancement strategy. But despite all these compelling arguments against replacing traditional firepower with drones, there's one area where Professor Bronk is absolutely unequivocal and highlights an absolute non-negotiable necessity. NATO must develop and rapidly integrate its own robust CUAS capabilities across the board.
Yes, absolutely critical. Non-negotiable.
This isn't a debate or a strategic choice. It's a critical, immediate imperative.
This remains absolutely essential and should be seen, in Professor Bronk's words, as a theater entry standard for NATO armies in any Article V context.
Theater entry standard, meaning you can't even show up to the fight without it.
Pretty much, yeah. For our listeners, an Article V context signifies a collective defense scenario, triggering NATO's Mutual Defense Clause, where an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. The reason for this imperative is clear. Russian forces already deploy even more UAS than Ukrainian forces, both qualitatively and quantitatively.
They have more drones than Ukraine.
Apparently so, and they're not static in their own drone development either. They are also rapidly innovating how they combine these drones with sophisticated loitering munitions, highly effective UAV-based battlefield ISR, that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, advanced electronic warfare systems, and their ever-present, highly effective artillery.
So we need to be able to defend against their drones, regardless of our own offensive strategy.
Exactly. NATO needs robust, integrated, and continuously adapting defenses against this significant, complex, and continuously evolving threat from Russia, not just for offensive operations, but fundamentally for protecting our own forces and critical infrastructure from the very systems we've been discussing today. It's about ensuring our own survivability and operational freedom in a drone-saturated battlefield.
Got it. So CUAS is essential no matter what. So, to bring this crucial discussion to a close, Professor Justin Bronk's powerful message to NATO is crystal clear. The extensive and innovative use of drones in Ukraine highlights their undeniable and critical role on the battlefield, but it's fundamentally a cautionary tale against abandoning traditional military strengths.
It's not drones or traditional power, it's how they work together.
It's not about drones versus everything else, but how these new capabilities fit into a larger, more comprehensive, and truly effective military strategy.
What's fascinating here is that while drones inflict attrition, provide invaluable intelligence, and play a truly critical role in modern conflict, relying on them as a primary replacement for conventional firepower risks playing directly into Russia's formidable and continuously improving counter-drone capabilities.
Which, as you said, lets them focus their defenses where we might be weakest if we go all in on drones.
Precisely. This would inadvertently concede a significant advantage to an adversary that has dedicated immense resources to countering this specific threat. The optimal strategy, as articulated by Professor Bronk, is not to discard our traditional strengths, our high-end air power, our long-range artillery, and our professional maneuver warfare capabilities. Instead, it is to invest in and optimize UAS to enable and enhance these existing NATO military strengths, precisely by using drones for roles like advanced reconnaissance, precision targeting, and the crucial suppression of enemy air defenses, thereby multiplying the effect of our most powerful assets.
What does this all mean for your understanding of future conflicts, military strategy, and perhaps even national defense spending? It challenges us to consider how quickly a perceived military revolution can, if not rigorously analyzed and adapted to, turn into a strategic vulnerability. In an age of rapid technological change where information spreads instantly and perceptions can often outpace strategic reality, how do we discern true innovation that genuinely strengthens our defense from a dangerous distraction that might inadvertently create new weaknesses?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the multi-billion-dollar question for defense ministries.
It's a critical question for military planners, policymakers, and indeed for all of us as citizens seeking to understand the evolving landscape of global security. That's all for our discussion today. Thank you for your time and participation in this important conversation. If you found this insightful, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Global WarWatch Network. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comment section below. Join us on social media. All the links are provided in the description.